So in this video, we're gonna go over assigning the proper assemblies and also cleaning up just some of the errors and the styling that we have with our corridor model. The first kind of weird error I see is this crazy uh, dip in our Treehouse Drive roadway here, and that makes me think that some alignment or elevation data is not being assigned correctly, and it's going all the way to 0 instead of staying up here in like 530, 560 where it should be. So I'm going to work on resolving that first. The first thing I'm going to do is try to just give myself a little bit of wiggle room. I have the alignment perfectly intersecting Alderman Road right now. I'm just going to extend it a little bit. That way there's a pretty clear intersection point here. And because I did that, I need to now go update my profile here. Again, make many backups as you're doing this. Don't want you guys to lose a lot of your work. So I'm going to come here, and if I go to the station tab, you can see that it is expanded a couple of feet. I'm going to hit apply and OK. You can see that it's a little bit longer now. So I need to expand my drawn profile to the end now, making sure I have object snapping turned on so it perfectly meets the end here. This also means I should be able to add the intersection into Treehouse Drive. So if I go to Profile View and Add Crossings, I need to select the object to add. So I want to add Alderman Road, hit Enter, and then select a Profile View. I want to add the crossing to this one. And here, I'm just going to change these to standard for styling purposes and click OK. And now I can see that the intersection is actually showing up. I only need the one though, so I'm going to delete that one. And it looks like there's actually two here. So I'm going to drag these out so I can see them a little bit better, if that is possible. One of these is for the existing surface grade, and then the other one is for the one that we made. And looking at the elevations, the existing one is lower than the one we made, so I want to keep the higher one, which is 570. So I'm going to delete this one. And now here we have our station information. All right, now that I've made those changes and hopefully kind of smoothed out what's happening here, let's see if that will fix our corridor model. In the tool space and the prospector, you can see this out of date warning on corridors, and that's because I updated the base information of a corridor. The corridor is based off of the alignment, the profile, and the assembly. So if you change any of those, you need to rebuild the corridor. And that lets Civil 3D recompute all of these connecting lines, as I mentioned before, right? Each of these is a section, and it connects them and does all the math for that. So I'm going to select on my corridors and just rebuild it. And now I'm going to view the corridor. It might not have fixed the problem, which is okay, but I want to see if it did. So I'll open this up, and now it looks like it did. My Treehouse Drive corridor is not going all the way to 0, which is great. So that was like part one of this. If you didn't have that issue, that's totally okay. But if you did, that's what you could do. The next thing I'm going to do is work on the plan view style here. So right now, the roadway is empty in terms of styling, right? You can see these different hatching patterns that show different objects. So the grass is like the cut fill. This is the little ditch we made. But the actual roadway isn't showing up as anything. So to solve that, I'm going to click on the corridor, go to corridor properties, and from here I'm going to go to codes. So the codes contain basically all of the information that assemblies carry with them and how those assemblies assign information to a corridor. So you can see every link, point, and shape in our assemblies. So, for example, looking at our sidewalk, the links might be where assemblies are connected, our sub-assemblies are connected. The points are all of these individual selectable points, and the shapes are these interior areas. Those are what we're looking at in the codes, all of the information that is stored there. So I'm going to go back to the codes. I'm going to open the link tab and find pave. And in pave, I'm going to look at the fill area material style here. And you can see right now it's assigned to pave hatch, but it's just not showing up. So I'm going to actually click on this if I can. I believe I might need to edit this to do that. So click this edit button, go to links, find pave, and in the material area fill style. So this fill style is what shows up in our drawing space. The render material is what shows up in the object viewer. Now, a quick note about Civil 3D. The object viewer will show these render materials that you can assign, but the model viewer, which is what I've been using because it loads a lot faster, doesn't show these render materials. Instead, it has its own like color scheme. I think the color scheme is what helps it render faster, or part of what helps it render faster. Hopefully in future versions, they add the ability to actually view your render materials in the model viewer and not just the much slower and older object viewer. But for now, at least I cannot find a way to do that. But anyways, going back to the material here, I'm going to click on this little edit button, and on the drop down, I'm going to change the pave hatch to a solid pattern. And I'm going to do that by going to the pave hatch, and then editing this as well. So in here, you can see the pattern here, and I'm going to change the pattern from ANSI 33, which is kind of that brick looking pattern, to a solid pattern. Just right on the top here. And from here, I'm just going to hit apply and OK, OK, apply, OK, and one more layer, I think, of applies and OKs. And now when I unselect my corridor, you can see it actually looks like a roadway now, which is great. That's what I wanted it to do. So that is like part 2 of this video. Part 3 is where we will actually modify the corridors to have the right assemblies. So let's do that now. The first thing we need to do is kind of reduce overlap here. So you can see these little diamonds that show up when you select your assemblies, and that lets you, when you select your corridor, there's a lot of different terminology here. And here I'm going to pull back Treehouse Drive because I don't want Treehouse Drive corridor to sort of render on top of Alderman Road. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit. And I'm going to pull it back a little bit farther than just the edge because we're going to create an intersection here, which will be different. So I'm just going to put this here. And you can see now that the corridor doesn't extend past where we moved that diamond to. I also need to do that for our intersections as well, so like the overlap here. But since it's in the middle of the corridor, those diamond grips don't exist. So we can add those ourselves using the split region tool right here. So if I click on the split region tool, I can actually go through and create splits in our corridor model. For example, I can put one below our Treehouse Drive intersection here. And you have to click twice for that to happen. And then I can also put one above it here. Here we go. And I'm going to do the same thing for the intersection up here between Alderman and McCormick. And note that you might need to do this on all four sides. So let's put it here. And give yourself more than just a couple feet for this intersection, because the actual intersection will take up some space. Okay, you can see now that I have the diamond grips on every side of the intersection that I need. I can escape out of the split region functionality and now actually go back into our corridor properties to the parameters tab, and you can see all of those different splits now show up as different areas. So we'll be using that to our advantage here. You can also see if you select an area, it will actually highlight on the screen. Unfortunately, there's not really a good way of moving around with both screens open. So my best advice for you is just pull it to one side, and zoom out a little bit. That way, when you open up this panel, you can kind of try to see everything at once. So the first thing we need to do is delete those extra sections from the intersections. So I'm gonna come right here, right click, and remove the region. I'm gonna do the same thing for this region. I'm gonna remove it, and then do the same thing for McCormick Road and remove that one. Right, so I removed those three regions, and you can already see it's telling me the corridor is out of date, and then I need to rebuild it, which we definitely will do. But before we do that, we can also change some of our assemblies. So for McCormick Road, for example, any of you guys who have walked down McCormick Road towards Slaughter or Lacey down here know that there's only a sidewalk on one side. So that's another use for the right sidewalk here. That's also why we made the alignment going west to east, is because then the right side is where the sidewalk is. And if we did it the other way around, we would have had to make a different assembly called like left sidewalk, for example, that had the opposite. So in the assembly tab here, I can click on it and assign the right sidewalk instead. And lastly, we're going to take this middle chunk of Alderman Road where O Hill is, and we're going to assign the retaining wall section here. The retaining wall. Hit OK, apply, rebuild. Again, you're going to get a ton of errors. That's okay. If I exit out of that, you can now see our updated corridor model. I'm going to pull the retaining wall section back a little bit more. I just know that it's not going to end up being this far up. And I'll exit out of this. Creating a save, just saving. And now when we open this up in the model viewer, you can see what our corridor looks like. So the intersections are free for when we need to model those, and it doesn't look like all of our sections got properly assigned though. So this looks right to me. It's just the right sidewalk, but there's no retaining wall here, and there should be one. So that means something went wrong. And the first thing I'm going to do is check the corridor properties to see what I assigned. I did assign the retaining wall. So now I'm going to go look at the retaining wall to see what is up with that section. So this looks like a problem to me. If I click on a subassembly, you can see the subassembly ribbon shows up. But when I'm clicking on my retaining wall, it's not actually showing up with that same. Oh, now it is. I'm not really sure what the problem is here then, but I'm just going to try to rebuild it and see if that will work. So I'm going to reopen my subassembly palette. Didn't want that to automatically snap. I'm just going to try re-adding this. If you didn't have this problem, then great. If you did, then follow along. I'm going to change the footing cover to 4 feet, and then add the daylight basin back again, and change some of these values here. So I know this needs to be 2 to 1. And then the cut and fill slope need to be 1.5 to 1 and 2 to 1 respectively. I believe that's all I need to update here. Now I want to see if I rebuild this, if the section will update. So I'm rebuilding it, and it's not working. And if I look at some of my errors, I might be able to get a good idea of why this might be happening, but not really. But I have a suspicion. If I go to my corridor and go back to corridor properties, my guess is that the retaining wall and the daylight doesn't know where to target. So the target is essentially used for any feature that requires, it's called a target in Civil 3D, but I like to think of it mostly as surfaces. So like the daylights, for example, need a surface target, and I think those just aren't assigned correctly. If I go into the retaining wall target options, you can see that if I go to surface, they also aren't assigned. So all of these should be saying O Hill surrounding area as a target surface, and that is why it is not being built. I just exited out of that. I'm going to set all of my targets at the same time in my surface and set all to my O Hill surface and click OK, and then rebuild. And now, hopefully, if I open my model, I can see the retaining wall here, and I can. So the targets were the issue here. If you are getting a similar issue where something that requires a target, which are mostly the retaining wall and the daylights in this example, are not showing up, set your targets there. While we're at it, I'm also going to do a similar thing for the frequencies. I'm going to set all frequencies. For horizontals along tangents, I think every 20 feet is fine. But on curves, I really want a much higher level of detail, so I'm going to use every 1 foot. Same with spirals, though we don't have any. And then along vertical curves, I'm going to do the same thing, maybe every 2 feet on the vertical direction, and hit OK. This is going to take a little bit longer to build, you can tell, right? Because I'm asking it to build a lot more. Also, just a note, a lot of these errors kind of aren't actually that useful. So if you get errors about like intersections, well, we removed the intersections, so we know that doesn't exist. But most of these aren't too big of a deal as long as in your drawing space, like the plan view, and in your model space, the 3D view, things look right to you. You don't really need to worry about the errors. If something looks wrong, though, please do look at your errors and let us know when you come to office hours or in a Piazza post what the error message is. I'm just pulling this back from the intersection a little bit more. And that looks good to me. I'm gonna save. And I believe that is all we have to do in this video. In the next video, we'll actually go over how we create these intersections. There'll be one video per each intersection.